Oh, we're live. Oh my God. Hi, Lauri. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Thank you so much for having me.
To start with the show, I want to give a quick shout out to our amazing sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Verivan. If you're GP or LP looking to simplify capital raising and deployment process, Verivan is here to help. Trusted by over 800 funds and managing more than $2 billion in transactions, Verivan offers a secure, streamlined payment platforms designed specifically for private capital markets. Say goodbye to manual reconciliation and repeated follow-ups. Raise and deploy capital faster and with greater transparency. Ready to make your fund operation smoother? Visit Verivan.com or actually use our link down below and see how easy it can be. Okay, to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So, maybe we could start from the beginning. So, you were a researcher. You were a research assistant at the very beginning, and
Mhm.
you have worked at Federal Reserve Bank, and you work as a product manager and director of product, and now you're a partner at Bessemer. Maybe we could start with like, what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career, kind of shape you into who you are today?
Mm, Question. Well, I saw that 'cause you're a UIUC alum. I actually grew up in Champaign-Urbana, and
Mhm,
so as a professor kid at heart,
mhm,
I've always had an insatiable curiosity to different topics, and have finally, after many different career twists and turns, have found a job where that is a
mhm,
feature and not a bug.
mhm,
And so from my academic research days, I've really taken that curiosity and wanting to get to the root of a problem and the source of truth. From product, in product, everything is about solving a customer problem. That's core, about finding something
mhm,
that someone's life or work would be better if
mhm,
you get this blocker out of the way. And in venture, I think you do that quite similarly. I still spend a lot of time with buyers trying to understand if they could wave a magic wand and make something better in their day to day or for their teams, what would that be? But then instead of working with teams to build those products, we go out and try to find companies moving the future forward in that way and invest in and support them.
mm. I wonder, maybe we could talk about like, since I think you also work at one of my favorite companies, which is LinkedIn. So like what are about like these like I guess like products that like or like the product experience kind of help you identify really important companies?
Hmm. I think LinkedIn is a pretty special company. It is
Mhm,
a very product led organization where
mhm,
everything that the company does is intentional. Some of it might be
mhm,
experimental, and not every experiment works. But one of the
mhm,
things that I've continued to take away from LinkedIn are this ruthless adherence to being able to be clear eyed in what you're doing. Our CPO at LinkedIn, Tomer, likes to say we might be wrong, but we're not confused. So that try both things, but with intention and a hypothesis of how it's going to work. And then
mhm,
to have the intellectual honesty to say when something isn't working and change course. And then the other side that I think couples that intellectual honesty and intense strategic focus is the culture of kindness and support, and where relationships truly matter. I in all my career, I don't think I've worked somewhere where I've had more friends. I still spend a lot of time with my more LinkedIn people, and it's somewhere where when people like me move on to other jobs, it's truly celebrated as someone's next play. And I think that that makes it a culture that's not just about uh, having building products that help people get jobs and find opportunities, but truly supports that with its own people.
I
That's
think that's
I try to
that's
instill.
I love that. I feel like that's such an interesting take. Like, we may be wrong, but we're not confused. So it kind of like you have to make a decision and then really like be all in on that decision. And then whether it's like if it even if it's wrong, you still like feel like, you kind of learn something out of it. I feel like that's a really interesting mindset. Maybe we could talk about like I guess like before you work at Bessemer, you were a partner at Foundation Capital and you have invested in a few like really interesting company like and maybe we could start with like pivot from being a PM to investing, what was that journey like to you? And maybe we could talk about like, from the sourcing angle, like since a lot of people enter any VC fund, like primarily the job is like sourcing and winning technically, because like I think the most popular deal typically have a lot of competitions.
Mhm.
Um, how do you maybe we could start with the transition and then we can talk about like um the sourcing and winning.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think there's no one way to do sourcing, as I'm sure you
Mhm,
know, and your
mhm,
audience knows. And so a lot of my transition was talking to different people about how they did things. And of course, there's this FOMO that sets in at first of like, oh, well, this person's doing this one thing, maybe I should try that
mhm,
too. And over time, realized that uh, I still find a lot of joy in trying to understand, like I said, working with people who might be buyers of developer tools or data infrastructure and what problems they have and what they might be able to do if they were unblocked in some way. And so like it get very, very similar to how I did my job as a product manager, but with a much broader scope. And then having spent most of my career in data science and product management, all of my friends still are engineers and data scientists and data engineers. And so a lot of my job became getting to spend time with the people that I had collected as friends throughout my career and learning from them and learning about their challenges and opportunities. And so then that enabled me on the sourcing side to be much more laser focused and talking to companies that were solving this problem where I already had a point of view on it needing to be solved. And I actually find that I think I was afraid, candidly, at first that I wouldn't enjoy the sourcing aspect of the
mhm,
job. But I've come to see it as a real discovery problem of can I've I get to be the matchmaker between people with problems and people
mhm.
with solutions and learn through every one of those calls and learn, especially if it's an area where kind of I've spent some time doing work understanding the problem space.
For sure. What is like a problem that you're currently looking at that you're trying to find solution to invest in?
Yeah, well, I'm sure many people watching saw the MIT article a few weeks ago
Oh
about
yeah, I was just people were just referring like agents are like 95%
Mhm.
agents are not like doing anything or like not launching or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
are not making their way to production.
Mhm,
And so I think that we're in this really interesting moment where in this
mhm,
era, unlike a lot of past eras, we're
mhm,
seeing a tremendous willingness by the enterprise to experiment with how AI might reshape their own product. They're
mhm,
far from asleep at the wheel, but the reality of operating in a global enterprise is still that you need to think about data sovereignty,
mhm,
security, product
mhm,
quality. And there's a critical gap there that is
mhm,
preventing a lot of these fascinating hack day experiments from
mhm,
becoming production deployments.
mhm.
So I'm spending a lot of time both with enterprise buyers and on the founder solutioning side, trying to see how we might solve some of those gaps from auth to evals and measurement to
I
kind of
have a company for you. I
oh
just put
really?
oh, yeah, sorry, this is, like, not supposed to be a commercial for this company. Like, yeah, I just, put in a tiny check last night and, yeah, to this, newest, like, YC batch company that will be doing a demo day soon, and I'm so excited about them. I'll share with you afterwards. I don't
Okay,
know
amazing.
for now,
This
but
is why
yeah.
sourcing is so fun when
I wonder, how do you think about, like, I guess, like, from the you mentioned about, like, auth and eval and, like, all these other aspects, like, maybe if you could give us, like, an overview on, like, is there any specific companies or, like, trends that you're seeing very interesting in these, like, subcategories?
yeah. So I guess a couple, both on the developer side and
Mhm,
on the data side. And one of
mhm,
the things that's interesting is that these two really do go hand in hand.
mhm,
As now instead of primarily building with code, we're building with context and need the right context to be part of the right experiment for right experience with the right use case, with also due attention to authorization. So some that we're spending some time in around memory and context to think about assistants not just as static experiences, but really dynamic collaborators, and believe that the most defensible products will be ones that can remember, adapt, personalize. And so there's an interesting thread around memory as a service and persistent memory and semantic understanding to both kind of create a deeper emotional experience for the user and more functional lock-in. And in this, I think the other thing that really comes to bear is that taste and judgment become real differentiators in a world where there's a lot that can be automated. Those experiences that are going to be stickiest are ones where the user experience connects to how someone really wants to do their job. And we're also looking a lot at evaluations. We talked about we've been talking a lot internally about how, and the last generation, the era of product that I kind of grew up in, of data-driven product, where you had ship something, get feedback, iterate, make changes. The equivalents for AI products are just being written. So we have startups like Judgment Labs and Brain Trust and LangChain that are offer eval solutions. How we then connect those evals to continuous deployment product workflow is something that some of our companies like LaunchDarkly are starting to think through, of when the mission is unchanged of enabling software teams to build great experiences, but the how we do that is radically different in this era.
I wonder, in terms of like, since like I think there's a few things that you have mentioned, I wonder, one of the things is like for these like AI native problems, so for example, let's say the I guess like the AI testing space, or like I guess like how do you identify how big the market is, or like how much revenue could they generate? Because they're not like really. I was like just on two conversations ago with an investor invested in MuleSoft, and so his perspective is like MuleSoft is solving a problem that's like already exists, like for the like there's already spending towards it, and then although they're building open source, they're like the first like open source solution, but it's more towards like there's a budget towards a particular problem. But I think for example AI agent testing, or like for these different problems, like how do you know if there's budget continuously going through to it? So like what if like, oh, these big companies like Apple or like Amazon or something, they just build it in-house testing their own agent? Like how do you like basically like think about the revenue side of things when you're evaluating these companies?
Yeah, it's a great question, especially in this moment where a lot of enterprises might not even know the answer to that question themselves yet, whether they're going to be the ones to build it in-house or find a solution. And some of that will depend on what exists, their particular timing. And as you know, being early is just as dangerous as being late. And so I think the best teams right now are spending a lot of time with those buyers, really getting deeper beyond, yeah, this would be great if you build it, to do they have real budget for it in the next quarter? Is this an urgent problem, or is this on their sort of experimental roadmap? And then relatedly, able to twist and turn on a dime. Seen a lot of really interesting teams who, when we meet them a year later, are doing something quite different than we met them in the year prior. And that is just because the market right now is so dynamic, and as a lot of the AI tool stack is just being written. That's a lot of what we're evaluating, is just how fast do they learn, how fast are they taking in market signal and building for what's needed today, while doing so in a way that plays to their unfair advantages.
What would you say would be the best makeup for these like newer companies? So like there's one of the observation that I made was like I feel like nowadays I think the technical mode is kind of like hard to have because of, like, everybody's using like these AI tools to build their own product, and then almost everybody's using the same tools. So, like distribution became a very big thing. So when I was like looking at the YC like LinkedIn page, it's like full on videos of like it's basically movie trailers. I was like, the production quality is like basically film school for everyone. And how do you think about like the differentiation between two AI products that are doing the same thing with a very similar background from the founders?
It is a really hard thing to evaluate in a point in time. The ultimate differentiation will come from the team's ability to bob and weave in this dynamic market. How fast do they learn? And through that, build their unfair advantages,
Mhm,
and can they think a couple steps ahead about what maybe they're developing some context moat, or they're building a user experience that is so delightful to their
mhm,
buyers that they don't want to leave. They're thinking about how do they align their pricing model so that it scales with their underlying cost structure and gets better over time. So those teams are thinking a few steps ahead, but really the differentiation will come through taking in signal and
mhm.
building from there.
Mm, I wonder when it comes to like I guess like maybe we could start with like one of the company that you have recently been very excited about or you have recently invested in that is
Yeah.
announceable. So like do you want to give us an example of like where you find from finding the founder to thinking about uh I guess, like, walking us through the diligence process beyond, like, you probably already have a thesis on, like, what to build and not to build. Like, how do you kind of, like, examine the product? And then, how do you think about winning the deal to thinking about potentially exiting down the line?
Right. So, I mean, a good example is Data Hub, and they're actually a good
Mhm,
example too of what we were talking about previously. So, what Data Hub does is they provide a data platform for the semantic understanding of all of an organization's data, whether that's in uh, Databricks Lakehouse or a Snowflake warehouse or an EC2 bucket. They can keep reflection both of what data is and then who can access it. And you can imagine this is a today enterprise problem.
mhm,
Most large organizations need some kind of data lineage solution and discovery
mhm,
solution. And so they can meet customers where they are today while having that foundation to build from for their most forward thinking customers, like the Figmas of the world, who are thinking also about how do we build agentic experiences for our
mhm,
customers. It might not just be humans accessing data stores and context, but agents and models, and the governance that is required there looks a little bit different. And so they have
mhm,
this ability to both meet customers where they are today and support them on that future journey. And so how we came to them is I got interested in this problem space of metadata and data understanding, as we were talking about a little bit before, with context being one of the essential ingredients for AI products. It
mhm,
begs the question of, well, how do you get this context? Who controls it? It can't just be you can't just throw it all into one store, because say not everyone should have access to all information, even within an organization, forget outside of it. And so I started poking on this idea of what would the metadata layer look like in an AI era. And metadata is not a new concept, but I do think it's fundamentally changed. And so I spent some time meeting every company that I could in this space, and would say my first introduction to Data Hub was in the course of those conversations. I kept seeing that other companies were losing to them. And so I reached out long before they were fundraising and wanted to have a conversation about why that was. What were they doing that was so magical that I kept hearing their name pop up, and eventually convinced the founder to take a walk with me, even though he was very clear they were not fundraising. But through that dialogue, we were able to build a relationship over the next 6 months. And so I had some advantage in getting to see their journey and how they performed just kind of exceptionally well going into the new year. And then we were fortunate enough to be able to lead their fundraise this March.
I have another question on this. So one of the things that like you mentioned, like I feel like this really demonstrated that you really went deep into like these like conversations with other people, and then you pick the winners from like hearing about them from like other people. And how do you think about like when a founder tell you like, no, we're not raising, like what should be that reaction from your end? So like I don't think like hard selling is like the case like for everybody, but like how do you like build trust with them to make sure that they're comfortable with it? And also like fighting for a certain level of allocation as well. So like let's say you want to invest like more, like how do you kind of like negotiate that?
Yeah, no, great question. This happens it's like all the time when great founders can't be distracted by investor conversations when it's not on their priority of what they're doing. And so I think that the key for me has been to show up for those conversations prepared and adding value in some way, even if it's just getting some steps in is an added perk. But being able to meet the founder with where they are, what they're what's top of mind for them, what they're thinking through, and then as you establish some kind of relationship, understand like why is it that you're not fundraising? Is it that you would find it distracting while you have all these other things going on? Then there's an opportunity for us to sort of do our work in the background such that we can make the process really light on their end and get them an answer without requiring a lot of time. So that's one lever. Maybe they don't want to fundraise because they think they're going to have a great next quarter and think that the valuation they're going to get today isn't what they could get if they go out and fundraise in 3 months. And in that case, maybe we can work with them to dream the dream with them and build confidence that they are going to meet those numbers for the next quarter or the next year. And if we really believe, then there's potentially an opportunity to pay forward.
I love that.
Why?
Yeah, for sure. I wonder, okay, so another question I have is like when you're going like I mean, I my on top of my mind it's like the YC situation just because I feel like it's such a classic situation as like everyone kind of like look at them anyway. So like among the, hundreds of company in every batch, like how do you quickly filter out like who is like worth going into a deeper conversation with, or is your approach going to be like let's just go with everybody and then see what's a general trend and then pick some of them? But I think like the dev tool agent space, I feel like there's so many innovations because there's like, on-call engineer. There is the engineer that does like just like engineering agent in general as a category. Like almost everything is could be like agentified. How do you think about like which one actually will be replaced by an agent versus like, just like they're just like maybe like becoming like I guess like the bigger company will just like produce something that will kind of like solve that problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the YC badge, justifiably so, has such a hot spotlight on it
Mhm,
that for me, I've learned over time that if it it's not the company's not pursuing an area where I already have a thesis or view where I believe that what they're building should
mhm,
exist,
mhm,
uh, it's not going to be a good use of that founder's time to spend time meeting with me. And so we don't take the approach of trying to meet with every company in the batch. We just meet with companies where we do have a roadmap and point of view, so
mhm,
that we are in a position to move quickly if something does click for us.
mhm,
On the dev agent side, I mean, you're so right that there are countless companies pursuing aspects of this opportunity, because it was clear pretty
Mhm.
early on that coding is a good use case for agents. And so to differentiate there, it's going to come from solving the problem either with a bit of a hook to it or a different angle, or meet some like truly novel technology. But it is a high bar at this point to not like, forget capturing investor attention, to really capture the attention of buyers and users when they have so many choices.
I wonder, so like right now, since like we just talk about Data Hub, and then like, what is like, I guess like the last three company that you saw were really interesting. And I guess like from the sourcing perspective, do you feel like they are, let's say, um, early engineers from XYZ company, or do you feel like they are just primarily a second time founder in general, or like are they just like coming out of a research lab? From your experience investing in these companies, like what do you think is the most interesting profile for you when you're looking at a founder?
Yeah, great question. I tend to gravitate towards people who are solving a problem that they experienced
Mhm,
firsthand,
mhm,
and that they have both a not just deep appreciation for the buyer and problem, but a real empathy for it.
mhm,
And so I would say the last couple of companies that I've gotten excited about are two or two or second time founders. But one is someone who was an early engineer, and saw a problem that wasn't being solved in a way that he believed should exist in the world. And
mhm.
I love that type of founder that is just through sheer will change the world to match his mental model of how it should exist.
Mhm. I so like engineer who experienced the problem firsthand, and then I guess like for the engineering crowd, like I feel like the other problem is like I constantly see like so like there's founders that are able to recruit amazing engineers. But on the other hand, like I feel like to productize something or like to actually start charging is a separate kind of question. So like how do you pick the engineer that actually can sell?
So one of the things, I think there's a difference between can sell
Mhm,
and hmm, believe is able to form a monetization strategy, or is
mhm,
able to build something that people want. And
mhm,
so being able to build something that people want, for me, is just an absolute, that needs to be there from day zero. You need to be
mhm,
spending time with your end customer and users. You need to understand something that you could create that would add value to them. And we're very comfortable investing at inception stage. Really, you don't have to have created this thing yet, but there needs to be a hypothesis that if it exists, there's a buyer for it and there's a market that's big enough to matter. And then in terms of learning to sell, one of the things I love about engineer founders is that they've already learned really hard things in their life,
mhm,
and they already
mhm,
understand a process of uh, trial, experimentation, feedback, and iteration. And so
mhm,
I find that my engineering founders, engineers turned CEOs who are then out selling their product, are most successful when they don't try to emulate the career salesperson, but really approach selling as an engineer. They deeply understand the problem, they can connect with their buyer, they're going to try some tactics and usually don't get it right in the first or 15th try, but the best ones are taking the signal that they get and using that to update their strategies and mental model, and be approaching sales with experiments that someone who doesn't have their background might not, like using agents to automate aspects of outbound, or figuring out where there are inefficiencies in their funnel that they can tweak.
mm. I love that. I feel like engineer learns fast. Maybe we could I guess like from the engineering, like in your mental roadmap or like when you're creating these theses, like what's your process for it? Would it be like, do you just code every day for like 30 minutes to like understand different things still? Or like how do you kind of like validate the problem sometimes from the engineers
I still spend a lot of time uh, with my engineering
community?
friends, yeah, community. And so at least a couple times a week, I'm having a coffee or taking a walk with someone who is a VP data or VP engineering, and just I just find it fascinating to understand what's going on in their job and their work. What are they trying to build, and how would it be better if they had ABC tool or not? And it's again like not all that different than when I was a product manager and trying to understand how could I help my teams move at a faster velocity by unblocking
Mhm.
aspects for them that were inefficient or where they saw opportunities for leverage. And then that also means that when I meet a company that matches a potential problem that they have,
Mhm.
I can send it their way, and hopefully I get to play matchmaker. As a
Mhm.
Jewish mom, that brings me a lot of joy.
I love that. What would be the conversation you have with the VP of Eng? And like, I guess like uh the question is maybe two-part. One is like, what's your most recent learning from talking to some of them? And second of all, it's like when you're like taking a walk, I guess like a lot of times like for me, like it's like, a lot of times it could be turned into a very personal conversation without like being productive sometimes. But if you go out there and be like, hey, tell me the latest trend or like what's on top of your mind, people will be like very threatened by like the question because it's like so general. Like how do you kind of navigate the relationship to like, continuously like be helpful and like build a long-term relationship, but also like being a product making a productive conversation for like,
Mm,
like basically recognizing the next opportunity. Also,
mm.
what is the next opportunity from these conversations?
um, it's so interesting. It's actually not something I ever uh, thought about because anytime I'm spending time with someone, it's usually because it's someone that I'm genuinely
You like,
to be spending time with.
yeah.
And any questions that come up are stemming from just real curiosity. And sometimes we go deeper onto personal topics, or sometimes someone will surprise me and say, actually, I'm starting a company in a space that is really different from what they've done before. And then we should use our time to talk about that and how I can support them. Uh, so I think never approaching a conversation transactionally, and to be clear that I can't always do that matchmaking. It's serendipitous when we can, but sometimes someone will tell me, I don't know, they want a flying car that takes them from the South Bay to San Francisco and avoid traffic. And like, don't we all? But we don't have that yet. So that aspect of it, I think, just unfolds really naturally and is the work of building a network over many decades.
Mhm.
In terms of interesting learnings right now, a lot of my network is struggling with the same prototype to production question. How do we take work that is very interesting in theory and make it
Mhm.
ready for prime time? Um, and in that, a lot of the questions are around security, context, auth. And so also some of what we do is try to make those connections between. One of the things that we're really fortunate to be able to do at Bessemer is provide community of our different functional leaders across organizations. And so our CTOs love hearing from one another about challenges that they're facing. Same with our CMOs and CFOs across the portfolio.
Mm. I wonder, so like since like I'm just also looking at your portfolio companies, like I think some of them are like um dev tool obviously, but I guess like when it comes to like evaluating these companies? Like, how do you do technical diligence? And then some of them obviously already have like, this company have like 103.9K on GitHub. Like, how do you evaluate these like metrics or benchmark? Is there any kind of like universal evaluation for you? So I think at the beginning like of
Mhm.
last year when I just started the daily show, like one of the investors said like the GitHub star like 8K was the benchmark to be like popular or not. But I'm not sure like if currently it changed. And so for example, like I talked to a founder that have like 5K on GitHub. Like, is that bad? Or like how do we evaluate these like kind of benchmark that also could be potentially hacked?
Yeah. I think we don't pay a whole lot of attention to the star number at a point in time. The trend line is a bit interesting to see how quickly something is growing or not, especially if there's enough time series data to see if that's
Mhm,
different than, say, what it was a year ago.
mhm,
Um, but what I find much more interesting is when there's a community around a project,
mhm,
and then through diving into that community and really immersing ourselves in it, we can get a sense of how are people using this tool? Is
mhm,
it solving a real pain point for them in their job, or is it something that they use more as a hobbyist? Uh, when they have an issue, how quickly is the team jumping in to support them and address that?
mhm,
So those signals that are like quite a bit more nuanced, I find a lot more signal in to be able to kind of understand, is this a product that maybe while it's small, maybe there are only 100 stars or 1,000 people who know about it. Does it have that core group of really passionate developers around it? And through that, then we try to squint and extrapolate and draw a line to see if you have those 10, what would it take to get the next 100, and so on? Is there a big enough market for that?
mm. I wanna maybe like double click on like, oh, by the way, I wanna maybe we feature our audience question and then we start like I opened your article on the data 3.0. Maybe we could cover that. But one of the audience, Matthew, is asking, uh, uh, he wants to hear your experience on building top of funnel screening tool. He's
Mhm.
building a technical screening tool for AI coding. It'd be awesome to like hear your go to market um, learnings,
Back in the company that I built.
I guess.
Sorry. Oh, yes. So this was way back in 2017 when early BERT models were just released to the public. And we had this idea of creating a more um, inclusive and fair hiring process by using AI to enable a much wider screening. The challenge there is, and then after building that company, then I spent a number of years at LinkedIn, also working on hiring solutions there. And so every recruiter, every hirer you talk to struggles with this problem of wanting to reach a wide audience, especially when we're talking about the entry level or frontline roles. Um, you want to get a wide top of funnel, but then the downside of having a wide top of funnel is somehow you need to screen all the people that come through that top of funnel.
Mhm,
And AI is such an like obvious use case to make this more efficient. The downside is that who pays in that transaction? If you go to recruiters, so you can go to staffing agencies, they're hiring all the time. So that's one option. If you go to an individual small business, they're usually not doing the sort of volume where they're going to be a large recurring customer for you. And then if you go to a hirer, a job seeker, if you do your job really well, you have natural churn in your products. You
mhm,
worked with them to get the job, and then success, and now they've left your platform. And so anyone building in this space, I would really encourage them to push on what are their unique insights and unfair advantages. And one of the magical things about LinkedIn is it's really for businesses. You have the consumer business, you have a recruiting business, marketing business, a sales business that all kind of operate against this social network core, which serves as the unfair advantage for the rest of those businesses to create the magic that they do. And so that's I think this is kind of a classic area where having a core problem insight is still not above the bar without a right to win.
I think that's like super interesting, and I feel like I like what you shared about the insight of like, you kind of have to think about like, sometimes like people would leave the platform if your product is too good. Um, Speaking of like, I guess like one of the things in the AI era, one of the most important things is data. And maybe we could start diving into this article that you and Janelle kind of contribute to about the data 3.0 in the lake house era. Like maybe we could start with like, if you want to give us an overview on why this segment of the article, or like why this article was like written, and then how do you guys came up with the current like insight, and then we can talk about the core learnings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a lot of fun to put together as we had conversations across, many dozens of buyers and builders. And through those conversations, we came to a point of view that the shift to a lake house in the AI era isn't just an upgrade, it's really a foundational shift as AI workloads expose limitations in either traditional data warehouses with structured data or lakes with unstructured data. We really need a support structure for both structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. And at the same time as we need this differentiation in input, we also are seeing an explosion in unstructured data in a Gen AI world. And so these many why nows from real-time, multimodal, composable processing requirements led us to a couple of areas that we're particularly interested in. One is AI native pipelines. Traditional ETL is really brittle for AI workloads and doesn't reflect the need to have data in code as an input to experiences that are data rich, not just data producing. Second, you'll see there we talked about metadata as a strategic frontier. We touched on this a little bit earlier around the thesis that led us to Data Hub and our enthusiasm there. We also have been in this space for a while with our investments in Big ID, and believe that data governance as that critical layer between the store and use cases is only going to get more important as we don't just have humans interacting with their data, but have agents and models at play there too. And then we also touch upon changes in compute engines. Compute becomes ever more critical when we need data for, again, production use cases versus post hoc analysis. Back in my very start of my career, I'm going to make myself sound like a dinosaur, but I could write a query on payments processing data at the Federal Reserve and hope that I got it right because it was going to run across billions of lines of data, and because I was going to set it to run, go to sleep, and come back the next morning and see if I had results. And when data is primarily used in analysis, that kind of time delay is painful but tolerable. When data is used as an input to product experience, it just becomes completely unacceptable. And so I think one of the things that we touch upon a little bit in the article, but as a smaller point, I think is really fascinating now is the data infrastructure is both a call and response to product experiences. So experiences like the Facebook feed and Spotify recommendations were possible because of underlying streaming architecture that made those experiences possible at the same time that users were
Mhm.
interested and demanding of this shift. And so now in an AI world where product experiences demand context in real time, that similarly puts new demands on the underlying architecture. And so we see these working hand in hand.
I have a question on this. So I was like processing what you just said. I wonder like the other day I like people were talking about Mercor, like the company, like people were talking about why they're so valuable is like they collect like data and then the data would be invaluable. And then the other day when I was like so when I was making my 100 list, obviously some of the Bessemer portfolio will be on our list, which is already on our list. But I guess like when I was like making my list, I was like interviewing the founders. So I was like doing these like chats with like, what you're building, that kind of stuff. One of the founders shared that like, they collect these like private conversations or like their product is like a chat related thing and then like they collect a lot of private data. um what kind of data actually can be used by enterprise? And another question is like what kind of data is actually valuable? Because also we have synthetic data, and basically it's kind of like AI data already. Like how, I guess, like what makes a company valuable in today's age? And then what kind of data is actually like useful for like companies and then can be used based off of like compliance issues or any other things?
Yeah, I mean the synthetic data push has been really fascinating to see. I think most companies will, in my opinion, end up in a hybrid where synthetic will be a part of the training landscape, but it's also still tremendously valuable to get real reinforcement learning loops. And some of the products that we've seen break out earliest, like GitHub's Copilot, has
Mhm.
this beautiful built-in learning loop where they make a code suggestion and the end user sees that suggestion and then either accepts it into their code or rejects it and either tries another suggestion or just authors the code themselves. And so through that human feedback baked into the product, it serves to make the product better and build a defensible loop over time. I think that a lot of the best products will figure out their own reinforcement learning loop,
Mhm.
but they can also supplement their learning with synthetic data with the other toolkit that many use is creating evals and then hiring either a, a team through Mercor or
Mhm.
Scale or Turing to then make judgments against this is what I expected the product to do. Is it actually doing it? And a lot of this playbook is still being written.
Mhm.
We don't have in a generative world, the product can look so different for different users that there isn't a finite set of test cases, but almost an infinite one.
Hmm. I wonder, so like how is like like I guess like the valuation of these companies being made of? So like, we constantly hear about like these like crazy acqui-hires. So even yesterday, OpenAI bought another company, like
Mm.
so like I guess like how are like I guess how are these like bigger companies like thinking about which company to acquire? Obviously it's based off the talent, but how do you tell like if like a talent that would worth 100 million versus like 2 million versus maybe 200K. So how do
Yeah.
you think about like the talent aspect of things? Like how do you think about like the talent's worth and where are bigger company are acquiring? So since I feel like nowadays, like when you're thinking about, obviously IPO is still the best possible outcome. However, like, I feel like these like acquisitions are like not bad, like for investors as well. So, um, yeah, just curious about your thoughts on the acquisition
No,
side of things.
some of these numbers are definitely not bad. They're just incredible. Um, so exceptional talent has always been exceptional. It's always been a rarity. But
Mhm,
in this moment where so few people have really built material product or businesses with
mhm,
AI, there's a scarcity factor around those individuals that I've certainly never seen in my career. And so we're seeing and that coupled with um, a willingness from the incumbents today to say, I'm not going to go quietly into the night. We are going to um, uh, disrupt ourselves and build AI products and bring in the talent to do that has created this uh, uh, really extraordinary acquisition environment where every day the front page kind of reads like a bit of a soap opera with you
mhm,
just don't know what shock to the system there's going to be. And so despite that, it really doesn't change anything for us at the earliest stages. We're still looking for exceptional teams building towards a big vision and a market that's going to matter. Does it mean that there might be some uh, more unpredictable twists and turns along the way? Absolutely. And I mean, the other factor that we have layered in there is that companies are staying private longer. And so the return of a more acquisitive environment also provides another avenue for liquidity, which is definitely not a bad thing for founders or investors.
mm. In terms of like, I guess like when you are predicting a company's outcome, like I guess like how do you think about exit or like exit potential for different type of like dev to especially dev to and infra companies?
So we definitely I wouldn't say that we predict an outcome. We hypothesize about what those outcomes could be
Mhm,
across a range from everything from investing at the earliest stages, especially we know there's a substantial opportunity that the bold, ambitious work that the team is taking on might not work at all. And so there's a chance that the company has to shut down or sell at a less attractive price. We then know that there's a range where it could be acquired, and we do think through who those likely acquirers could be, both
mhm,
because it's just important for us and the founders to be aware of the kind of adjacent strategic landscape
mhm,
and for them to be thoughtful about building relationships with those companies so that they uh, so that those larger companies have an eye towards partnership versus competition, that they're working together in that way. And then of course we don't make any investments unless we can dream big
mhm,
and see a path where if all 15 things on the bumpy path ahead go
mhm.
right, this could be a really big company and be a company that matters in a sort of generational way.
What is a question that you would ask early stage founder to, like all the time? I feel like one of the things that like I
Mm.
heard from our show, one of the investor would ask like, "How do you think about like getting into $100 million ARR?" Like, give us like to hear like if that person's like thought is like very detail oriented. But when I ask founder that question, the founders are always like, "What do you mean?" Like, so because I think the earlier stage founder, even they're cracked engineers, but like they may not have actually thought about it. So like to take in that kind of intake, like do you just proceed with not to invest or like how do you kind of like get to the bottom on like the people's thinking framework to evaluate if someone's backable?
I care a lot about their learning loops. So one of the things I spend a lot of time with is just
Mhm,
understanding, what did you try over the
mhm,
last quarter, 2 quarters, year, and what did you learn from it? What did you hear from your
mhm,
customers? And then with that input, what are you doing about it? How is that influencing your roadmap? And maybe it's not, and maybe I'm gonna spoil it now because it's usually not a question that founders
Mhm.
get a lot, and so that I tend to get them a bit less rehearsed and get a picture of what are they actually trying, learning,
Mhm.
changing as a result. Because what we're underwriting is not what have they done today, but what are they going to do in the future. And so for me, working with someone who's a learning animal is
Mhm.
both a lot of fun and it's probably the only way I know how to get some signal about how are they going to adapt in such a dynamic landscape.
For sure. I want to be mindful of time. Maybe we wrap with a quick 30-second fire round.
Sure.
What's your favorite book?
It's hard to pick one. I try to alternate between reading fiction and nonfiction. And with nonfiction, I at least read a lot of biographies or history and try to avoid the business books du jour with all due respect to the authors, many of whom are amazing, insightful individuals, if anything watching. But I find it important to let my mind be brought to different eras and ideas and
Mhm.
stories. So I'll cheat and give you two. On the fiction front, I really love Haruki Murakami and especially Norwegian Wood, since I think it's a nice example of him doing something a bit different than his typical writing and
Mhm.
shows his incredible range. And then on the biographical or historic side, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning made a early and lasting impact on me. And actually, what I think is ultimately really fun about startups is that they are a hero story that's unfolding in real time and we get to be a very small part of.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
I say my grandpa, Rube. He grew up in the Bronx and comes from nothing. He fought as an infantryman in World War II, used the GI Bill to go to college and then night law school, and eventually became COO of American Greetings. And so growing up, he was always my cold dash of perspective.
Wow. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Probably my mother. My parents divorced when I was very little, and she worked her up to eventually be one of the youngest and only partners in her law firm, female partners, and is an immigration lawyer. So took very seriously that people's lives and careers depended on her work and
Mhm.
has done this one thing really well for the last 40 years. And so I think from her, I really learned this appreciation of craft and purpose.
Where can we find you outside of work?
I have 3 kids who are 10, 8, and 6 who love to swim and ski, so we're usually either, at their swim meets at the pool or ski races on the slopes, or sleeping is probably my 3rd hobby, so we can
Oh my
check in again
God.
in 10 years and
Yeah.
maybe I'll have some other hobbies.
Love that, especially sleeping as a hobby. That's insightful. Anyway, Lauri, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
Such a pleasure, Grace. Thank you for having me.
Let me quickly